What does it really mean when an artist walks out of prison, and nobody from their own team is there to greet them? No cameras waiting. No chain flashing under bright lights. No luxury SUV parked outside with tinted windows and a driver ready to take them back into the world they left behind. Just a gate. A quiet step forward. And the sound of everything they once had, fading into uncertainty. That's exactly how Fujiano's return unfolded after 5 long years behind bars. One quiet Instagram story from a producer, captioned, "No more free food," and that was it. No official rollout. No welcome home moment. No carefully planned reintroduction to the industry. Just a digital whisper where there should have been a roar. And maybe the most telling part of all? No visible sign of the man who once publicly backed him, who once said he was one of the few artists truly worth investing in. So let's start here, with a question that cuts deeper the longer you think about it. When the spotlight disappears, who's really in your corner? Because this isn't just a comeback story. It's not even just about music. It's about loyalty. It's about business. It's about survival. And what happens when those lines stop being clear? To understand why this moment feels so heavy, you have to go back, not just to the beginning of Fujiano's career, but to the mindset that built it. Before the deal. Before the fame. Before the fall. Fujiano, born Kwame Khalil Brown, wasn't handed anything. His rise wasn't built on industry connections or overnight virality. It came from consistency, from hunger, from a certain kind of energy you can't fake. His music had a duality that made it stand out. On one hand, there was rawness, unfiltered street perspective, emotion that felt lived in, not performed. On the other, there was rhythm, bounce, something that made his tracks work just as well in clubs as they did in headphones late at night. That balance is rare. And people noticed. But here's something worth asking. How many artists actually understand the moment they're in, while they're in it? Because momentum is a strange thing. It builds quietly, then suddenly, all at once. And in 2020, everything aligned for him. The deal came through, 1017. A label with history. A brand that meant something. A platform known for identifying talent before the rest of the industry caught up. It felt like validation. Like a rival. A respected veteran leading the charge. A hungry artist ready to prove himself. A relaunch that promised a new era. On the surface, it looked perfect. But beneath that surface, cracks were already forming. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Some opportunities come before people are ready for them. Not talent-wise, but mentally. Because success doesn't just amplify what's good about you. It amplifies everything. Your habits. Your instincts. Your decisions. So when 2021 came around, things didn't just shift, they unraveled. The arrest in Memphis. The firearm charge. The release on bond. At that point, there was still a path forward. Still time to reset. Still time to correct the direction. But then came the decision that changed everything. He removed the ankle monitor and disappeared. 3 months. No contact. No structure. No plan, at least none that the outside world could see. And that raises another question. What drives someone to run, when staying could save everything? Fear. Instinct. A belief that the system is already against you. Or maybe something deeper, something harder to articulate. Because from the outside, it looks like self-sabotage. But from the inside, it might have felt like survival. Still, consequences don't wait for explanations. When he was eventually caught, the sentence came down, 5 years. And just like that, everything stopped. Momentum, gone. Visibility, gone. Opportunity, gone. But here's where the story becomes less about one artist, and more about an entire system. Because while Fujiano was locked up, something else was happening. Silence. No updates. No consistent mentions. No visible effort to keep his name alive. And that leads to a question that doesn't have an easy answer. When an artist falls, what responsibility does the label really have? Is it purely business? Or is there something more? To understand that, you have to zoom out. Look at the bigger picture. The entire 1017 roster at the time wasn't just a group of artists, it was positioned as a movement. A new generation. A fresh wave. A redefinition of what the label could be. But over the next few years, that vision didn't just weaken, it collapsed. And not in a simple, predictable way. It wasn't just about poor sales or lack of hits. It was something heavier. Some artists passed away. Others ended up in prison. Some faced serious charges that derailed everything. And the rest. Eventually released. Think about that. Not one or two. Almost the entire structure, gone. So here's a question worth sitting with. What does it say about a system when nearly everyone in it disappears? Is it coincidence? Is it environment? Or is it something deeper, something built into the way the system operates? By late 2024, the label looked completely different. Stripped down. Quiet. Focused on business decisions rather than building a collective. From a corporate perspective, it made sense. Numbers matter. Investments need returns. If an artist isn't generating revenue, the equation becomes simple, even if the reality behind it isn't. But from a human perspective, it's complicated. Because behind every contract is a person. Behind every investment is someone who believed in something. And that leads to another uncomfortable question. Should artists be treated like numbers, or like people? Because when you listen to some of the voices that came out after those releases, there's a pattern. Relief. Not frustration, relief. Some said they were happy to leave. Which makes you wonder. What kind of experience makes someone feel free when they're no longer signed? Now fast forward again. April 2026. The gate opens. Fujiano steps out. 5 years older. 5 years changed. 5 years removed from the life he once knew. And what's waiting for him? Not much. No rollout. No coordinated comeback. No visible support from the system that once believed in him. Just space. And silence can be louder than anything. Because compare that moment to others. We've seen artists come home to celebration. To strategy. To carefully timed releases that turn absence into momentum. Here, nothing. And almost immediately, speculation begins. Rumors spread that he's not planning to work with his former label anymore. The reason? Allegedly, there was no support during his time inside. No financial help. No consistent outreach. No sense of presence. Now pause and really think about that. If someone represents your brand, your label, your investment, and they're locked up, what do you owe them? Is it strictly business? Or is there an unspoken code? Because in both street culture and music culture, there's an expectation. Not necessarily extravagant gestures, but something. Consistency. Acknowledgement. Support, however that looks. And if that expectation isn't met, what does that do to trust? But this isn't just about one artist. There's a pattern here. Another artist from the same label served time, and reportedly experienced similar feelings when they came home. A lack of visible support. A sense of distance. A feeling that the connection had faded. And then things escalated even further. Reports surfaced of serious disputes tied to contracts, situations that went beyond music and into something much more intense. And that brings us to the core of the issue. Control. Because at the heart of every label deal, every contract, every partnership, is leverage. Who has it? Who loses it? And what happens when it shifts? When an artist is rising, they have leverage. Buzz. Attention. Momentum. But when that momentum disappears, whether due to prison, controversy, or time, what happens then? Does the leverage disappear too? Or does it just change hands? And here's the deeper question. Is loyalty still real when power dynamics shift? Because it's easy to support someone when they're winning. When the numbers are strong. When the attention is there. When everything looks like success. But what about when it's not? What about when there's risk? When there's uncertainty? When supporting someone doesn't guarantee a return? That's where things get real. And that's where this story lives. Now, standing at the edge of a second chance, Fujiano faces a completely different landscape than the one he left. The industry has changed. The audience has evolved. The attention span is shorter. The competition is louder. And maybe most importantly, the support system he once had isn't the same. So what does a comeback even look like under those conditions? Is it possible to rebuild without the machine behind you? Or does independence become the only path forward? Because there's something else to consider. Time doesn't just take opportunities, it changes people. 5 years is enough to reshape perspective, to rethink decisions, to question old patterns, to understand things that once felt invisible. So maybe the bigger question isn't just about what he lost. Maybe it's about what he learned, and whether that's enough to build something new. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one artist walking out of prison. It's about what happens next. Does he rebuild? Does he reconnect? Does he redefine himself completely? Or does the silence continue? And maybe the most important question of all, when everything you thought you had disappears, what do you build from what's left? That question doesn't just sit in the background, it echoes. It lingers in the silence after the noise fades, in the quiet moments when reality finally settles in. And right now, that question is standing directly in front of Fujiano. Because despite everything that's happened, despite the time lost, the distance, the uncertainty, he still holds something most people overlook. Attention. Not just casual attention, but focused, emotional, invested attention. People have been waiting, watching, wondering. His name isn't just circulating, it's trending. There's curiosity in the air. There's anticipation building like pressure before a storm. And if used correctly, that's power. But here's where it gets complicated. Power doesn't always come with clarity. Sometimes it comes with noise, voices pulling you in different directions, emotions clouding judgment, past wounds demanding reaction. So the real question becomes, what does he do with it? He's still young. That's one of his biggest advantages. Time hasn't run out, it's just been interrupted. And interruptions, while painful, don't always mean endings. Sometimes they're just pauses before reinvention. So now, standing at this crossroads, he has something even more important than attention. He has a choice. He can react emotionally, let frustration take over, let the past dictate his next move, let anger write his narrative. He can move strategically. And that distinction, that's where careers are either rebuilt or permanently broken. Because here's a truth many artists only learn after it's too late. The real battles in the music industry aren't fought in studios. They're fought in contracts, behind closed doors, in legal language, in clauses most people skim past without fully understanding. Deals that look promising on the surface, but carry long-term consequences buried deep within the fine print. So what's the smart move here? It's not violence, not public outbursts, not emotional reactions played out in front of millions. It's information. It's audits, legal reviews, a deep, uncomfortable dive into the reality of what was signed, what was earned, and what was actually owed. Because what if there were discrepancies? What if payments didn't match agreements? What if obligations weren't fulfilled on the other side? What if rights were misunderstood or misrepresented? Those what-ifs aren't just questions. They're potential leverage. And that leads to something even bigger. How many artists truly understand the deals they sign? Not the highlights, not the promises, but the full scope, the risks, the limitations, the long-term implications? Probably fewer than most people think. And that's what makes this situation more than just a personal story. It becomes a case study, a lens through which we can examine something much larger. Because at its core, this isn't just about one artist or one label. It's about the collision of two worlds. On one side, you have street culture, built on loyalty, relationships, trust, and unwritten codes. A world where respect is currency and personal bonds often outweigh formal agreements. On the other side, you have corporate business, structured, calculated, driven by contracts, profits, and legal frameworks. A world where everything is documented, negotiated, and enforced. And when those two worlds collide without clear boundaries, things don't just get messy. They unravel. Because expectations begin to clash. One side moves on feeling, the other on paperwork. One expects loyalty, the other enforces terms. And when those expectations don't match reality, that's when problems begin. Now take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Over the span of just a few years, what once looked like a rising powerhouse turned into something far more complicated. Multiple artists lost their lives. Several ended up behind bars. Others were quietly dropped. And those who remain, the relationships don't seem as solid as they once were. At what point does that stop looking like coincidence? At what point does it become a pattern? And what kind of environment produces outcomes like that? Those are uncomfortable questions, but necessary ones. Because patterns don't form without reasons. They don't repeat without underlying issues. And ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. As of now, Fujiano is doing something interesting. He's staying quiet. No explosive interviews. No emotional social media posts. No rushed attempts to control the narrative. Just silence. And in today's world, where everyone is expected to react instantly, that kind of silence stands out. Because silence, when used correctly, isn't weakness. It's strategy. It creates curiosity. It pulls people in. It keeps attention focused without giving everything away. It allows space for thinking, for planning, for observing. And sometimes, saying less says more. But that silence also raises questions. Where does this go from here? Does he stay connected to his current situation, trying to repair what's been damaged? Does he fight, legally, strategically, to separate himself and start fresh? Or does someone else step in? Another label. Another opportunity. Another chapter waiting to be written. And then there's the question fans are quietly asking, even if they don't say it out loud. What does Fujiano sound like now? Because 5 years isn't just time, it's transformation. The industry has shifted. Trends have evolved. Sounds have changed. Audiences expect something different now than they did back then. But one thing doesn't disappear easily. Hunger. If anything, time away intensifies it, refines it, gives it direction. So will that hunger show up in his music? Will it sound different? More mature? More focused? More calculated? Or will it carry the same raw energy that made people pay attention in the first place? At the same time, this moment doesn't just reflect on him. It also casts a spotlight on Gucci Mane's legacy. And that's where things get layered. Because there's no denying the impact. He helped shape modern rap. He played a role in discovering major talent. His influence stretches across an entire generation. That part is solid. It's history. But legacy isn't frozen in the past. It's shaped continuously, by present decisions, by current outcomes, by the stories still unfolding. And right now, the narrative surrounding his label is complicated. It raises questions that don't have easy answers. About leadership. About responsibility. About the balance between business decisions and personal loyalty. Because how do you manage both without one undermining the other? How do you build something sustainable in an environment where unpredictability is constant? And perhaps most importantly, what does accountability look like in a situation like this? In the end, this isn't just a story about someone returning. It's about what he returned to. A changed landscape. A complicated past. A future that isn't guaranteed, but is full of possibility. And what happens next? That's entirely up to him. Because second chances don't come often. But when they do, they carry weight. They carry expectation. Pressure. Opportunity. Fujiano has something most people don't at this stage. A fanbase that still remembers. A sound that hasn't been forgotten. And a moment, right now, that can be turned into momentum. But only if he plays it right. So here's the real question, the one that goes beyond music, beyond contracts, beyond industry politics. If you were in his position, after 5 years away, with unfinished business, unresolved tensions, and a spotlight waiting for your next move, what would you do? Would you rebuild quietly, letting your work speak before your words? Would you confront the past, addressing everything head-on no matter the consequences? Or would you walk away completely, cut ties, start fresh, and create something entirely new? There's no perfect answer. Only choices. And consequences. Because one thing is certain. This story isn't over. In fact, it's just getting started.